Hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion of Peril's Gates. This is the sixth book of The Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts. And Jared is holding the book up instead of swiping it across the screen. Shocking. Oh,
Matt's showing off.
Matt's taking over for him. Um, so today we're going to be talking about chapters 8 through 10. And for the next discussion, which will be 2 weeks from now, we'll talk through chapters 9
No,
through.
11.
Oh, I can't read
11
Roman
through 13.
numerals. I read 11
fair,
and
she did
9.
read chapter 9 about 5 minutes ago.
That's true. Chapters 11 through 13. That was a Roman numeral error. It wasn't because I didn't finish reading.
Sure.
And we will be finishing the book up over the course of this month because the last discussion will be for the last 4 chapters of the book. With me, of course, we have the usual group of friends. Chris, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Yes, my name's Chris Moore, and I'm from the channel Chronicle of Chris. I part of the page tune community over there, where we organize everything and discuss this, and also part of the Speculative Speculations podcast as well, where we talk about sci-fi books mostly.
And I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I also partake in page chewing activities, and also in speculative speculations.
My name's Matt, also known as Miggins. On Twitter, over at Whole Books. I'm also a reviewer over at Fantasy Book Critic and Nemesis of Varsha, because I usually finish early. She finishes late, so it's kind of like a prime balancing going on there.
We need to keep the law of major balance. This is how we do it.
All right, and I am Chibi Po, and I hang out on page chewing. Sometimes I mostly lurk, and lurk on other people's YouTube channels and say things, and read these books. Varsha.
Oh, introduction. Yeah, I guess my name is Varsha, and I run the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And also on the podcast Speculative Speculations, where, like Chris said, we read a lot of sci-fi books, speculative books, because I'm trying to get these guys to read some other series that may or may not be sci-fi. With all that said, let's start with chapter 8, where Jared explores his mate site. I love the sense of wonder that he has as he goes through it, and a lot of other interesting things happen. For these 3 chapters, I felt like I was, well, maybe this is true of every 3 chapters that we read, but I felt like I read an entire book, even though it was just 3 chapters of a book. But a lot happened. So let's start with Jared and his mate site and all the things that they did to try and escape from Lysair and his army.
Who cried?
Acorns are deadly weapons.
Wait, at
cry.
what point do you mean there were several possibilities to bring out tears?
Well, the part that really hit me was Arathon's pleading towards the end of this sort of section. The part that really got me when he says this, I've actually got here when he's like, "After you, there is no one else but Lyra." That
Yeah.
really got me. That really
Yeah.
broke my heart. Like,
I-
yeah.
I didn't necessarily cry, but that section or this whole chapter where Jared's basically preparing to die, and I don't see how he's going to, like, we leave him where we leave him, he's still alive, but I don't see how he's going to get out of it alive because, Keol didn't, and I doubt that Jared is going to. But it put me in a bad mood for an entire week. So it had an effect on me, let's just say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of funny. I love the bewilderment and wonder accompanying the gift of mage sight that he's suddenly, he's going through and he's discovering all this stuff about having the mage sight and a realization that just killing is a desecration in and of itself. And But I wasn't 100% sure at what point Arathon went into the trance and like how their argument ensued. Because Arathon he didn't want Jarrett to be the one to go set the trap, I guess, and put the acorns in place or what have you. And so I was a little I was hoping somebody could explain to that because he's begging Jarrett not to do this, and like Matt said, and but I wasn't sure, was he like in an astral trance, like
So
talking with Jarrett?
yes, at that point, from the point where the companions were talking about how Lazar's forces were coming and they needed to do something, and Jarrett comes out and is like, "Get me the companions now." And by that point, he had already started the stages of Aerith spirit walking, but hadn't completed it with binding him to Lithial. So,
All right, yeah, okay.
and so at that point, all Aerith knew was Jarrett was going along with his plan. But then Jarrett's like, tells Bragan is like, "No, I've changed I have altered the deal."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing something
Yeah.
else.
And why do you think he did that? Like, why did he alter that? Is it just because he thinks he was a better person to be able to do like the ritual of setting these things up and stuff like that, or was it something more?
That plus with the elevation to his mage sight and everything, and being able to see, the energetic patterns and how our actions affect everything. Plus, the bit where he mentions how he saw his, sister and parents and everything.
That's right.
Oh, right.
He
Yeah.
didn't feel like he would, Bragan is a better swordsman, and he didn't feel that he would be able to shoulder the burden of killing while having his consciousness elevated with mage sight and everything.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Yeah.
And the thing he was unsure of, it seems to be, is how Bragan would take on the role, because even he was surprised when he said to Bragan that he wanted him to take a prominent role, that Arthur knew how he would respond, but Jarrett was a lot more unsure. And it was only when he turned around and said yes and took the honor of it that he went, okay, that then this definitely is possible. And my role is set. The die is cast, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely liked his reasoning for choosing Bragan. That was pretty cool. Very, once again, a very descriptive section that there's a lot more going on than what you might think with the interaction between all the characters there.
And am I right in remembering all the way back in Curse of the Mistwraith when Arathon loses mage sight, it's because he's protecting Jireh? Is that right? Yeah. So in a way, I really liked how that was really full circle, so that now that Arathon doesn't have his mage sight, but Jireh does, that in a way Jireh's kind of like paying that back, which I found really kind of emotionally fulfilling to have a sort of callback in a sense to that, way back when in book one.
Very cool.
Yeah. There were three things that I really loved in this chapter. Just Jarrett's exploration of his mate side, seeing the world anew. I really love every time we get a description of the world through a mage's eyes. It's almost like when you see descriptions of the Paravians and what they do to the consciousness of the people who see the Paravians, right, who encounter them, and what happens afterwards. He feels deprived of something really beautiful, that to the point where it doesn't seem worth it anymore to carry on without that. But so yeah, I really love that exploration with Jared. And then the two realizations that he has with regard to Arathon. One, that what it would take him to kill with mate sight, and secondly, that that he gave this up, right? Or like that he's living without it right now. It We'll get to the part that I want to talk about a little bit, but yeah, the fact that he's living without it, and the level of sacrifice that it seems to be now, given what Jared has. I think those two realizations, those also, I think, were really moving portions of this chapter. That one sort of question or point of discussion I had there was the way Jared phrases it when he says, "Oh, you've been living without this all this time. How do you bear it?" It almost feels like there's a certain amount of free free will, or like Arathon's choosing to hide his mate side. Almost, it's not that he's helplessly without it. That there's a certain aspect of choosing to be without it. Is that right, or am I reading too much into that?
Correct. His you know, his gift of compassion has basically walled it off. Everything's healed from his misuse of it, but it's just walled it off so it can't be used as a weapon. So that's why when we had the scenes in Fugitive Prince where he was completely, the curse had subsumed him, even though he was fighting it, and he like basically at that point he let go of his compassion, at all. He was just murderous and he didn't care. So, he'd regained access to his power briefly, not the way he wants it, but
Ooh.
Got it.
Does
That's
the
scary.
yeah. Does the mage sight enhance the effects of the curse, or are they related in some way?
not some stuff coming up in this book will venture on that, but not really. But the mage sight comes part and parcel with the mage gift, and rather than use that as a weapon, he's just
Sure.
his compassion walls it off. So
Okay.
and that just cuts everything off. Mage sight, mage gift, everything. So
There aren't any sort of safeguards that Arathon could put in place for when he goes, loco under the curse. Like, because obviously he'll know that if the curse happens, he knows that, oh, I could gain access to my mage sight again. I'll lose my compassion.
Yeah,
Like,
but I mean, it wouldn't be him. It's like earlier in this one, he was all agonizing about the fact that he was very likely going to lose his bard gift as well, because he had weaponized it, and he was worried that using it as a weapon to kill was going to cause the same, him to choke off the ability to do that.
Cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Very much so.
And then, of course, Alara meets Davian.
the new double act.
The dark, mysterious stranger who's waiting in the lobby, as it was. Oh, by the way, he's a bit of a reputation.
Yeah, it's like someone's come to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't help you here. You got to go. You want to talk to him? It's all you.
I mean, Ilera's having a time of it at that hostel. No, she meets a unicorn. Now she's meeting Davian, riding alongside him as an eagle.
I'd
Yeah,
love
that
to
was-
meet these guys at a hostel. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen when I go traveling. Can you imagine, Janny? I've seen a unicorn at the hostel in Colombia.
It'd be great if you walked into one, Matt, and said,
Yeah.
any arts adepts here? Any just checking before I pick where I'm going to sleep.
Can anybody take me on an eagle flight somewhere? I want to see.
No, very, 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 very cool. And also, well, probably more so the character of Davian himself, because he's just not playing by the same rule book that we're used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We only get a little bit of him in chapter 8, but I think we get more of him a bit later on.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of learning about him and just wondering what he's up to, because we don't know. He's kind of keeping an eye on things with his eagle flying around there, and and he, as we'll soon later see, he lashes out to the sticky fingers, and and but we don't know, we know he was kind of expecting it, um but we don't know what his plan is. We don't know what is he actually doing. What's he keeping an eye on? What's his game plan with Alara, and why is he letting her in on this or making these deals with her? And so it's very interesting. I can't wait to find out more. I really can't.
Yeah, I agree. I really love their encounter because Elera, I love that she doesn't quote unquote bow down to anybody. And she's being snarky with him, and he's like, yeah, you're the one they mentioned, or something to that effect, which I guess he's been keeping an eye on the world. And the thing I'm very curious about, I think I've said this before too, he's the betrayer, and presumably he betrayed the fellowship, the compact, or whatever, and he was responsible for the killing of the High Kings, as far as we know. At least I think that's been mentioned so far. So it it seems on the surface like he's trying to help Arathon, and he did promise Ilera towards the end that he's going to, which makes me wonder why, if his enmity was with the High Kings um, of Athera. Yep.
That's the thing that's getting me as well, is this name Davian the Betrayer, but who's given him this name? Of course he's betrayed the High Kings, but that's from the perspective of the Fellowship. But we don't actually know his reasoning. So I've learned, as I think we all have through Janny's work, I'm sort of trying to withhold judgment until we know what his motivations were, because yes, technically he betrayed, but what was his reasons? That's going to be the important thing, I think.
He sort of presents as like one of the good guys, if that makes sense, because like all he's done so far, he could have done worse to Moriel, but he was just basically teaching her to stay clear of my way. I don't want, this is your warning that the Coriani shouldn't be interfering in whatever my plans are. Like, just you clear off. And he engineered that whole sequence, the pact with Alara, everything, knowing that what was going to happen, the plan he was going to set, and even like more so than that, this kind of devilment in him that says, I'm better than you. Like, he humiliated Moriel because of the timed aspect of it. She felt foolish. She felt like she'd been played. She felt like she wasn't really, she'd have been fine. She'd done herself injury when there was no real danger, so to speak. So it wasn't just enough to hurt her. He had to psychologically damage her in some way as well.
Yeah. I think
he's very. Oh, go ahead.
Earlier in this one too, where it was remarked that like Luhane and Caradmon had to steer clear of her because of the fact that she had the Waystone and had trained them all up, and that Davian was the only sorcerer who among them who had the ability or skills or whatever to oppose her trying the stunt that she did here. And so we kind of got that foreshadowed earlier, because they're like, yeah, Davian's the only one that could shield one of the other discorporates. But more importantly, as Alara says, you are quite the master of convincing illusion. And he's like, am I? And then she's like, yeah, but everyone said you were rendered discorporate. And he says yes, but he's clearly something going on there, because he's got a physical flesh and bone.
Well, it's a perceived weakness, isn't it? Because Moriel was the same with him being discorporate. He'll not be able to. She sees it as a form of weakness, but obviously, as you say, there's something more going on there, because he isn't just. He's not like Caraman floating about and doing, well. Yeah. I mean, literally is, because he's an eagle, but he leaves the footprints in the ground, doesn't he?
Yep, because the wind brushes him away and all. But and I have that instance somewhere, or maybe it's not in these chapters, where someone traces, he shows up for someone and they trace back his footsteps and they just appear at one spot. I think that's a chapter after this. So
He's a very perceptive character, I've noticed. So he knows that this is really going to rattle Moriel, that, she's got this nice young body that she's inhabited. She can, kind of start afresh. And then he just completely bedridden her, right? And then even with Lyra, he seems a very perceptive character. He's picked out her personality, which makes you think, he's got a lot of wheels spinning in that head of his.
I will say this without giving anything away, but you know how Grand Conspiracy ended, and the Coriani, and the Prime Matriarchs, all riding high because she unleashed her big, stunt, and she's been riding high doing whatever she wants, after this chapter, and then another moment coming up. Yeah, she's you see how fast that was reverse on her. Some people have no patience for her nonsense. Wait till the next book; it gets even better.
You can't do that. I mean, we've all been kind of going that it all changes this book. That happens every damn time with these books. It's like this book is where shit's gonna happen, and then somebody says,
"Oh no, lots of stuff happens."
There's great stuff happens in this book. See next book as well every time.
Yeah. Typically, some people do not have patience for the Prime's nonsense.
You mean in the book, right? Because if you mean in the reading group.
Oh yeah, well, both of those, but I don't think any of us can do, some of the, I haven't learned how to, send fire spells, across, crystal telephones or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't learned how to do that yet.
Yes.
As soon as I do, I'm going to start a new industry for that, and then that'll be my work going forward.
There you go.
Quartz crystals, Korean quartz.
Crystal communication. There we go.
So as the Alliance was going along here, searching the whole, area, Dayan Roman, right? Is that how you say that?
That's the one.
Yeah.
And they're beset by these little elemental devils almost. It's like a constant harassing of the Alliance. Yeah, the Alliance of Light troops.
Yeah.
And was that a result of Davian, or was that a result of who do you think that's a result of? Like, why are they being harassed?
Probably just the Ayets, because it's a big ornery group of people, and they're just their emotions and whatnot attract the Ayets, and they just start harassing to, like they do to Dakar. They just start harassing you just to get reactions, because they creates energy they can feed off of.
Okay, yeah, because I just found it interesting that was included. It was just like a little tiny section, but it was included in it, and I know it's in there for a reason. So I know that this is something that might have some relevance later. And of course we get a little bit more into Sulfan Evans' head in this chapter, and how he's been given this impossible task to basically hunt down, because there's a bunch of decoys that he's gotta, he's trying to hunt down Arathon, the Master of Shadow, the ultimate villain, right? And but there's all these decoys that he's got to deal with, and he almost seems a little bit sympathetic in parts of this chapter, and then of course later on that goes out the window. But
yeah, it does.
But I just, once again, Janny's like letting you get that much into this guy's head, where instead of just writing him off as just another villain, you just get more reasoning and more another side for a short period, and I just liked how she did that.
Yeah, so he does some stuff, fairly unpleasant stuff here, but also I like his, I just think it's over these 3 chapters where he's also getting really kind of fed up with Lysair. He's really starting to lose his patience with him.
Yeah. Later on, he does horrific things, and then he's also later on arguing with Lysair about the whole policy and the whole correction and stuff like that. And I thought that was really well done, because it's like he's not just a blind follower.
Yeah.
And that's just excellent characterization all around.
It's like he's definitely evolved beyond what you thought he'd be at the end of Fugitive Prince, where he's just like, I am just mindless war commander or whatever. And he's like, I'm starting to see that there's a lot more going on here, and you're a moron. And then what is it through this part after? Oh wait, no, that's
after that becomes Kevlar.
I told you. I told you he's not dead. I said it. I called it.
He obviously wasn't dead. He had the pebble. He had the pebble. He had the pebble of power.
He had the pebble of power, but it wasn't on his person. And I guess we knew at the end of the last news item that he showed up somewhere at an adept hostel, but
it is interesting that his body actually is in a bad way. I think I sort of presumed that his body was kept intact, but that isn't the case as we get through this. It's very much an exploration about why his death.
Yeah, and it ties back to Warhouse, where with the healing scene with Dakar and Erethan and the little girl. It's like they absolutely can heal you, but you have to be willing to admit to what you did and why. And the little girl couldn't, was like, no.
But we get a pretty illuminating, I think, of all the bits of the three chapters, and there's so much happens, it's cool stuff. This is the most enlightening and illuminating part, when he comes to admit that he actually can see the manipulation, not just of Lysair himself, but Lysair's own message as being folly in some way, without never having ever met Arathon or anything like that. This is very much this is what he sees, and as part of coming back, the kind of promise or the kind of intimation is that he will have to put that right or deal with that or in some way as part of coming back to life. So he just can't sit in the sidelines and do nothing about it and come back to life. He's going to take a proactive part.
Well, it was interesting because she ended this section, and other than the news items, this chapter with like a ... like a to be continued, because it says he could remold himself on the wings of free will and arise anew to become whatever he chose ... And that just like, okay, what is this going to lead to?
But for me, that's the most exciting part of all the book, because we now have somebody who isn't part of either party. Well, not directly, like certainly at the cold face of either, but that actually seems to have an influence on what's going ahead. Like he's almost certainly got, he's got his celestial justice traits and characteristics from his father, but he also probably has his light magic as well. And so there's another. We don't know that yet necessarily, but it is kind of
the gift of justice is inheritable, but the light power is not.
Ah, damn.
Mage gifts and things like that
go through clans.
Be inheritable, but not the light power.
Damn it! Get him some.
Get him some. Give him some.
Give me a pity or like
that.
Another
pebble.
I
think
like
it's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Basha.
First.
I was just gonna say quickly that it's interesting. I think we've got these two sort of wild cards in Kivor. However he chooses to come back, I think to me he kind of represents the kind of hope, the light, so to speak. But then, of course, with Davian, you have this other wild card where we don't really know what either of them are going to do. And as you said, Chris, that they're both sort of separated from either side, and so these, I think, we're going to see a lot of importance with these characters that are going to come to influence the narrative.
Dot dot dot.
Dot dot dot. Yeah.
Part of me worries that he'll come back a little like like Miranda and Lyser and all the people on the side of the light who will see anything as evidence that they are right and the other side is wrong. But given that he's being healed in the at Adept hostel and that only pure things happen there, I think there's hope for him to be the force of change on the side of the light.
But
Except
I
with
think
dot.
I think the difference here, well, certainly the way that I read it, is not so much that he's searching for evidence. He already knows at this point. He has already decided what's going. Obviously, he didn't. Now, as was before, he sort of decided to die or be part of that because he couldn't sort of live with that responsibility in some ways of being part of his lineage and knowing what he knows. So he's sort of caught in a place where he has to act on it.
Yeah.
As part of, or there's no point coming back to life or restoring his body, because if he's not wholly committed to it, then his body will not be restored, because he won't have committed to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really like that we saw that the fellowship would have appointed him the what's the word, the heir of the, given him the hiking ship, right? um if he had lived then, or if he wasn't about to be tainted by everything that the side of the light would do to him, which I think that and what we are seeing about what he's realizing about how things really are at where are they, wherever, like with Lyser's army, right? uh, I think that's giving us a bit of insight into what the inheritance of the justice, when it's not tainted to a twisted purpose, might look like, which makes me feel pretty bad for Lyser, because I mean, I I think maybe he's a good. We haven't had a corresponding comparison for what someone with the right sense of justice might be like, and Kever is that person. So I think he gives us a nice counterpoint to Lyser and sort of a what Lyser could have been if he wasn't twisted by the Mistwraith, which yeah, I think it makes for an interesting character study both ways.
Well, I mean, Lysaea did have. It did seem to have a bit more arrogance than this kid
That's
had
true.
portrayed previously. So, I think, and I think that is what the Mistwraith may be using to its maximum advantage in some cases. But yeah, that's a very interesting theory about this kid. He he doesn't. We'll see. I mean, that's very very interesting. I mean, if he doesn't have the light powers, though, what is he going to bring to the table eventually? That's the question, I guess.
And I'm interested to see how he's going to be pushed, because Lysaea's thing seems to be he's still got this. He's still got issues with his mother and the way that things happened with that back on the Splinter World, and that can be used as like a wedge for him, as a way to really kind of chip away at him. Well, with Kivor, we know, of course, he didn't have the easiest of childhoods, sort of where everything sort of controlled by the high priest, and his mother kind of being separated from him a lot of the time. I'm kind of curious to see, is someone going to use that and how that affects Kivor, especially now that he's coming back as well. who's going to
Yeah.
use that to kind of chip away at him, and how is that going to affect him in the way that these other kind of childhood traumas have inflicted upon Lysaea.
Speaking of his mom,
Yeah, go ahead.
still no
You go
Elaine.
there. Yeah.
Still no Elaine.
Yeah.
Well, not just no Elaine. So Elaine's went missing with the knowledge that Talith was murdered, gone, and Jarrett also brought up the fact that Talith was murdered in front of Lysaea and Sulfin as well, planting that seed. Now, he brought up two things. Obviously, one, that Arthur was the half brother, which Lysaea then admitted was true, and the other, if a smart person might look at that and go, both things must have been true. But Lysaea's not that person just yet. I don't know.
No.
Yeah,
But-
we got that when you said smart.
Well, as we saw that even when he recovered from his delirium, Lysaea also was very quick to, it's like, yes, this is true, but here's my heavily slanted version of events.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. The story of his mum was very heavily edited by this stage of what happened to her.
Right? So and I have to know, does he actually believe the stuff he
that?
told
Yeah.
Sulfin Evan at this point, or is he really is he feeling okay to manipulate him? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
Big question.
something of a convenient, this is what I believe, so that he doesn't have to dwell on it. So it's a convenient self blinding.
Interesting.
There was one other thing he said which I think felt edited too. Maybe it was mostly just tied to the story of the mother, but yeah, lots of lies in that story
Yes.
for sure.
Well, a lot of half truths, rather than
Yeah.
than lies per se, because there is obviously he's admitting to some of the things that actually did happen, and then he has editorialized his own version.
Sorry,
of
what's
how it would happen.
what's the word? You're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our point of view. So what I told you was true from
Yeah.
a certain point of view.
The mother that I knew would never have done it willingly. Yeah.
The mother you knew was also you were also 3 years old when you last knew your mother.
Yeah.
Formative memories.
But couldn't you just visibly see Sulfin Evans' jaw drop when Lysaea said, "Yeah, he's my half brother"? It's like, what?
Well, I was sort of surprised that hadn't been sort of common knowledge even by this stage, because of the amount of scrying and things that are going on from Cerebral, etc., all that kind of stuff. I would have thought that stuff would have been, at least within the upper reaches, would have been stuff that was very much well known. But it was interesting that it wasn't, and that it had such an effect on Sulfin. That kind of revelation. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then Jarrett got mutilated.
Yeah. Oh, that was
and
Okay,
Jared
first,
makes jokes on the forum about that.
let's be real. But first, Jarrett sets off the trap that causes Lysaea to, obliterate almost all of his, troops.
Yeah,
just lays waste to him.
That was, when it said in there, Light answered that one line, one line paragraph. Light answered. You were like, oh, here it goes, and then he's like almost leveling mountains and stuff, and
and then Sulfin Evan, dispels it, which sets off the second part of the trap, and even more of the troops get obliterated.
Oh boy!
I thought that section was fantastic because I think we don't actually see Lysaea. What's the word? Why can't I do words today? We don't actually see Lysaea using his light, right? We just see the effects of it, and yet you can see, I think, the extinct of his curse-driven madness. I think something words to those effect are used in this chapter, but the instantaneousness with which he responds and how severely he responds, leveling things, it's like a crazy person's reacting, right? And you definitely get that sense with how he responds with the light. So I thought that that section was supremely effective in, I don't know, like we've seen it multiple times, just how bad the curse is, but I think once again, for how the severity of it and the damage that it can do, I think that was all pretty fantastic.
Yeah, like how he just starts blasting randomly, you know, all over the place because he feels like Earthen's everywhere. And then, you know, blasts himself, you know, to where he collapses. And then when Sulfan Evans clears the circle and smashes that one acorn and it sets it off. And then you get that little description, you know, where, you know, a crumpled figure in white silks straightens up and just immediately starts blasting again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question about before that happened. So Jarrett's, you know, he's setting up the acorn traps and stuff like that, and he's still having some difficulty dealing with his new mage sight. And he did he have an opportunity to shoot Lysair?
Yes.
He did. Okay, I thought so because he was hesitating, and he was and he said something like, you know, a man is a man, no matter the choices that shaped his belief or origin,
Yeah.
and that's part of his, you know, mage sight interfering with all his senses and you know and he was so he had Lysaia in his sight with the bow, like he could have shot him down, and he eventually didn't do it. He and I just I was like, ah, like how many of us were like, take the shot, you know, but
Yeah.
he couldn't do it, and then of course, then everything went to hell with the Lysaia's furies consuming all the world, basically, which was just incredible.
Yeah, it wasn't just Lysair that he couldn't kill. He couldn't foresee when he had made sight of taking any life at that stage.
Yeah,
It was very
right.
much a case of, you know, again, that wonderment at Arathon, the kind of weight that must have went on him and what it's sort of understanding him a lot better and kind of using that as a vehicle to kind of say, look, we only know a small section of what Arathon's been going through over the period of his life, you know.
And I think this section is one that will really kind of grow on a reread because I know, at least for me, I'm calling myself out here. Initially, I was kind of like, oh, you know, when Jirette is just kind of like, I can't kill anyone, and we're just kind of like a bystander, really. I was kind of like, oh, but I want to like see the fighting, and Janny kind of upends those expectations that, you know, war is this horrible, awful thing, but somehow in fantasy, it's like, oh yeah, cool, kill the bad guys, and we want to see that. And I was certainly, you know, having that. I want to see them win, and then it suddenly, you know, floored me. Hang on a minute, like he's not doing anything. What do you do? I want to see the cool, you know, action things. I want to know what's going on. But actually, I think, you know, on reflection and certainly when I reread this, you know, I think that section is really going to grow on me because you really understand the poignancy of that moment and the point that Janny is trying to make, which she said several, you know, times, that a lot of the inspiration comes from watching a documentary on the Battle of Culloden and just seeing the destruction and wanting to kind of like write a book that kind of makes that point of the senselessness of war. And you really get that here. It doesn't immediately kind of feed your senses, your adrenaline. You know, it's not that entertainment factor, entertaining though it is. Janny's doing something different with this, which is really cool.
Yeah, because often in fantasy, it's made very easy for the reader by the fact that it's always a very good thing against a very evil thing, and so that kind of drive for murder or otherwise kind of is rationalized in the reader as being, well, it's for the better. You know, this is going to save life, or you know, it's going to tear it apart. And even if you think about when she did the Riftwar saga with Remedy Feist, that was that the first three books were that story, which is very much, you know, the good killing the Serani. but then she got involved in telling the other side of the story to say that this wasn't just about good versus evil. You know, there was complexities, there was cultural reasons, and all of that kind of stuff. So it is obviously something that she has been involved in, either directly or indirectly, in her writing in some ways. And they always have these moments every so often in the books where you see a humanity to Lysair. Like, there's nobody really Team Lysair, but at the same time, you do find yourself sympathizing with his predicament sometimes. Like, he literally is blinded by a curse. We sort of forget that him and Arthur were actually quite close at one stage before the curse, and that you know, they had bonded quite well, and that everything that's happening now is a product of other hands at work. You know, other people interfering in what's going on through these two people, and that a lot of the loss of life that's come from it isn't actually either of these two people's fault in a lot of ways. It's kind of through the hands of others, which makes our bloodlust maybe a bit more complex.
The bloodlust.
Plus,
Yeah, he had no resource to grapple with the twisted obsession that drove him. That was one of the quotes out of that end of that section there, and it's yeah, beautifully put. Yeah.
the Eagle's Eye View chapters with Davian and Ilera and eventually when Muriel gets involved, I think that that was brilliant because the levels in which the levels of perspective there, we are seeing Ilera see something through Davian's eyes, and through her, Muriel has a hook into the whole situation, and she's seeing what's unfolding. So somehow we get to understand what's happening in like 4 different places without changing a lot of context. I think that that chapter was pretty brilliant in that regard.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
layering and the levels there.
Yeah, not only that, but we see through their eagle eye view
Right.
what happens to Jarrett when he's bound hand and foot, because we don't actually see them actually take him and bind him, you know, all that stuff. You know, we only get that information later when we see that Davian and Alera's viewpoint, and so it wasn't like a straight storytelling technique. It was, now you're seeing a different viewpoint, and this is a little bit further along in the story, and you had to put together yourself how Jarrett got where he is now, with a dragging him hand and foot bound through the wilderness there.
Yeah. We do get only pieces of that, right? Because, well,
Yeah.
when Jared becomes unconscious, when he wakes up, we find out that bad things have happened to him. My God. uh,
That was brutal. It really
it
was.
It was.
That was in the hostage section. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
And
at
it was
the one part, the eagle's flying over, and it's like, you know, Davian's like, there's something wrong here. And then finds, you know, and Alera's like, oh, hey, that's an uncleared remnant of a Coriani sigil. And then Davian's like, oh, shall we provoke?
So can you guys help me understand the nature of the pact? Because I thought that Coriani do something for a person and then that person becomes entangled in some sort of oath, uh, oath debt. But that what was the exchange between Ilera and Davian? Was it just that they had entered some sort of pact? And even if it wasn't that she was doing something for him, what was the pact? Was it just the wager that they predict that something will happen, and trying to figure out whether or not that happens gives Muriel the entry point she needs into Davian?
Basically, yeah, Davian baited her.
Well, yes, but how?
Yeah, by entering into an agreement with her, since he's, you know, pulling her spirit along, you know, or sheltering her as he, you know, flies over, you know, over the, you know, down Ramon. That allows her with the Coriani sigil to be like, all right, you know, he's sheltering her spirit, in an agreement with her. I grab Alera's spirit. He's connected to her by their agreement, that he's, carrying her along, and it yanks him in too.
I see. So it wasn't through an oath that like they were hoping
Right.
to be able to pull Arathon into. It was just the point of contact. Like she had an entry point
Right.
to
She
her.
figured, he
Okay.
did an agreement with her. That meant I could grab Alera and yoink him in too. And she assumed that he was just a discorporate spirit, so he'd just be yoinked in, and she'd slam the cage door on him.
But it wasn't when she was simply flying along with the eagle in spirit form, right? It was at the moment when they made the pact.
Correct.
That
Yeah,
that Subtlety decided that she can do something about it. So
It's more
one,
tactical.
what was the pact? I don't think I fully understood that. And I guess the second was the pact somehow allows her. Like I guess we don't need to fully understand that. It maybe
Let's
not
see, where
even be
did it-
explained.
I was a little wary of that pact that she made with Davian because I was like, because we still don't know about Davian. We still don't know,
Yeah.
why he's the
Mm.
betrayer and what, all that stuff. So is this kind of like the deal with the devil? Is and so
It might
so
actually
you
be a little bit of a oath of debt, or a binding agreement between them, where it wasn't really a debt, as so much as he's like, hey, I want you to, I will try to do this, and I ask for your company as witness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I remember the
Witness,
word.
that was the pact. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to understand what Ilera's side of the bargain was. I think Davian's side seems to be that he'll protect Arathon from here on out. But what did Ilera do for him in exchange was my
Yeah.
question. Yeah. That she just watched while he did the thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's like, you just hang right here.
Okay.
You don't have to
Fair.
do anything. You just sit here and watch.
So did Celidi / Muriel know what the pact was, or just that they made a pact? Because that's a pretty suspicious pact to make. Like, I'm going to do something. All I need you to do is watch. Like that.
Yeah.
That has bait or trap written all over
Oh
it.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, no, and I think we've seen that. That she's envious / has a much higher opinion. Well, she's not it's not to say she isn't dangerous, but much higher opinion of her abilities than actually warrants. Like I think it was earlier in this with the Ask the Depths where Alera's like, the Fellowship seem to do whatever they want, and without the Coriani restricting them at all, and the Ask the Depths said no feat is beyond them. And she just thinks about that. She's like, this, with what she learned, she's like, the Coriani are insane. That they think they've got any chance.
And I think there's something like she wants to elevate humans back to where they were before, whatever that was. But in some sense, like, who's out there asking for her to do this for them and therefore wreaking all the damage in the place where they're living? Like, sure, she's in theory looking out for the future of humanity, but maybe humanity doesn't want said future. Like, it feels like she's making a lot of unilateral decisions here on behalf of a very large group of people.
To some extent, I mean, we know she's got the records for like humanity when they were before they came to Aethera, and all the stuff that she can't do anything with, and is like, she's assuming, yes, of course humanity will want to go back out into the stars and not be stuck on this one little world. Why wouldn't they?
I mean, that's her reasoning, though.
Yeah,
Like, that might be true, but it's her reasoning, and she's not even consulting with the rest of her order. She's making all these decisions by herself. So, yeah, I wouldn't be unhappy to see her taken down, like you promised.
Oh, she better be. I'm waiting. Ever since Future Prince.
Right. And okay, I love that Celery basically looks and feels like Moria now, and
Yeah.
apparently no one but Lyrenda can see it. But the way her skirts fall over her feet, that's always described, that like you can't really see her feet, that really invokes something of the spider about her, which we've seen Muriel, often we've seen metaphors about like comparing her to spider, and the thing that she's creating is a web and so on. But there's just something about the fact that like her skirt is like she's sitting in one place and her skirt is like covering everything about her that invokes the spider. But also she's now in a dark room, she's an invalid again, so she seems to be sort of regressing back to where she was when we first met her.
And in the Fluctuations chapter set at the end of the first chapter, it actually calls her a fair spider in a spun web of spellcraft. Prime matriarch Celody confronts the sister house prioress. So she is, there's definitely a very conscious effort there to reflect that spider imagery.
Yeah.
So she's
Yeah.
basically becoming Shelob. We'll find her in the tunnels. Shelob.
I like that. We're reading Children of Time now, and I'm starting to like spiders, but I hope not too much, just so I can continue disliking Moria. Yeah. So, do we move on to Lyranda's punishment, or was there anything before that we should
well,
talk about?
I'd like
Chapter 10 with Lysair and
Evan,
Tessa,
and yeah.
real fat.
Oh, right. How could I forget?
Yeah, and I liked his Lysaiah's. Once again we get Lysaiah's viewpoint in his justifications for trying to destroy Arathon, and he's saying like my gift of light became rededicated as the world's hope and shield, and he has he's given himself the line, and he's given the line to Sulfin at the same time, and you get that's his point of view, that's how he sees things, and he once again, like Chris was saying earlier, that his subjection to the curse, and how much control he has over how he thinks about justice and all that stuff is kind of laid out there with his justifications.
Yeah. So the thing that Sulfin Event holds him accountable for about some manipulation he did at Avenor, I don't remember what that is. Can you guys remind me?
So
Sulfin.
Well, my memory of that is that they talked up the atrocities, etc., to extract coin out of all of the traders. They talked about they told them like some untruths, so to speak, about the state of the war and what they had to do. Remember, he like doubled down on after his defeat, to basically say, "Oh, the coffers were running low," and they basically riled up the crowd and kind of told a lot of lies. So that is what I thought I was referring to in that regard, rather than telling the truth, because the conversation between Sulfin and Lysair comes about. Lysair was telling him, we need to tell people the truth from now on, and I think Sulfin is looking at him going, you're a bit, it's all right when it suits you. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do like where Sulfin's like, yeah, so you wonder why the people in Hampshire, like my father and stuff, don't associate with Erdain, or
right.
why Cerebeld and his acolytes are unloved by, others. And, it's like, because the gold helps, promote, prejudice and whatnot. And Lysair is like, I won't traffic in prejudice. And Sulfin's ever like, yeah. Well, no, you already are.
Calls him out a little bit. Yeah. It does. There was also that great. Now I don't know if we knew it in this much detail, but the explanation of how the powers are present through the clans, and actually how the Coriani get the women, etc., was very later. Quite again, I found that very interesting and rich in terms of actually how similar and not similar the clan and townspeople are in a lot of ways. You know exactly where the clanspeople kind of came from as a genesis of the towns, etc. All of that was really really fascinating.
And another thing I liked about it too is because you could say it's a little info dumpy,
Yeah.
but she does it in such a way that you don't notice that because with the backdrop she applies for it, where Lazare's kind of still reeling from blasting everything to hell and back, and and so he's sitting there all wrapped up in blankets and shit and stuff while Sulfan Evan is making bread. And I just liked, because he's still doing these mundane things while they're talking, and I'm like, okay, this just makes it. You can just like other scenes, you just visualize it. Two guys, it's cold, windy, their camp's devastated, and he's just kind of poking at the fire to make bread, while they talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that. You suggested the rogue mage talents that riddle our society all originate through the inherited taint of clan forebears. That was the question Lysaea asked. Yeah, you're right. A lot of great explanation there about the town and clan relationships and differences and similarities, and it's pretty good.
And even the bits about where it kind of talks about how people didn't what's the way to phrase this? They didn't begrudge this. It was seen as a sign of great honor that their kids were then taken by the Coriani, etc. It was actually like a gold star for the family and the lineage they came from. So it gives you an idea about the attitudes to magic and to the talents, so to speak, outside of this war, if you know what I mean, outside of the way that it's been outlawed and that kind of stuff. This has been going on for much longer than Lysaea or Arathon have been involved in some ways, and it's that was the natural order from it, and also where the clans people were kind of the men who were kind of pushed out by society, then ended up getting pushed out literally out of the towns in some ways.
And this is something from last week that I had mentioned, and Janny corrected me on it. So Alara isn't necessarily of clanborn descent, in her her backstory. We don't know actually specifically her descent, or if Jenny knows, she hasn't shared it. But when humanity arrived, it was those who were talented that became clans people, right, who had a measure of talent, but not all of the people who had talent necessarily volunteered for the roles that the clanborn and the high kings take up. So there are townfolk who so the bit where Lysaea is like, it all comes from clown forebears, it's like, that's not entirely true. But the sorcerers and whatnot will absolutely know who has what lineage, but there's plenty of townsfolk who may have the abilities that just kind of pop up now and then.
Got it. I liked how Lysaea kept jumping to well, I didn't like it. I got angry at him, but he kept jumping to conclusions while Sulfan Evan was telling him the story. He says, "Oh, intermarriage was not allowed. Oh, that's a terrible practice." And Sulfan Evan's like, "No, that's not. It wasn't that big a deal. They didn't kill any children over this." And then I don't know. There were a few instances like that where Lysaea kept jumping to conclusions and finding an excuse to be angry. And Sasvinavan kept shutting him down, like, no, that's not how it went.
Yeah, that's because Lysaea is not, even though he's been here a little while, he's actually not from this land, and so it would make sense that he had that certain level of ignorance. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and there's a slight ignorance about from Sulfan Evan's point as to how the darkness went away from the land as well. He sort of misunderstood that part of the story as well from his point of view, which I thought was interesting in that regard, because we as the reader going, well, obviously this happened because Arathon and Lysaea fought it and dismissed it. But as far as the townspeople or the clanspeople are concerned, who aren't necessarily listening to either Arathon or Lysaea directly, it's very much, no, are you sure? I thought it happened this way.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like that they don't whatever means of communication they have, that they only have, I guess, largely rumors and
Yes.
word of mouth. And I doubt the fellowship went around saying, hey, look, this is what happened. So they just came to conclusions based on whatever, I guess, rumors they overheard.
So this is why it's worth donating to Wikipedia every year, right? Because we rely on Wikipedia for all this shit now. You know, can you imagine that if they had a wiki around then, there probably would have been no war.
That's true.
Yeah, and then Sultan Evan too is like, wait, you really think you're going to take arms and challenge the Seven? And Lazare's like,
Oh yes,
I will risk this. And I would see, you know, and he's making all these assumptions there too. He's like, you know, no Farsighter or sinner will freeze for want of this, or I will see no child, you know, starve for the sake of a grasslands. And it's like, you know, you don't actually know that any of that happened.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
You're just going like, oh, you know, you're just playing right into the, you know, well, humanity's, you know, I want this land. Someone take it. I don't care, you know, about anybody else except us.
I could definitely see a future where Sultan Evan kind of joins with Kivor over Lysaea. I think we're starting to see a transition because I think that Sultan's like he's dedicated to the cause that he thinks that he's working for, and I think he's slowly coming to the realization actually the cause that I'm standing for isn't necessarily the same thing that Lysaea is standing for, and that he'll start to sort of seek something that more reflects that. So I don't know, of course, but that's my thing, that maybe he might be pulled more towards Kiva, seeing it depends on how that turns out.
Interesting about that, because I was thinking the same thing, but in the direction towards Cerebel then, because I can see that splitting as a faction in terms of them wanting more power from themselves outside of like Lysaea's meddling in what they want to do, as because they already feel quite powerful, if you know what I mean, the priests that are within that, and they feel like they are sort of getting above their station. But as you've seen from the interactions with other people are afraid of the priests. When the priests are going there, people are bound down to them in lieu of Lysaea. And I think what I see the direction in similar ways from something, but going with them rather than Keyboard. But I do wonder who Keyboard's allies are going to be, because it's not very clear at the moment about who they could be. Even they'd probably be a hodgepodge of kind of people that sit around the middle in a lot of ways. Maybe we'll get Patrick back. We'll get the Sabradans. We'll get around that kind of level. I would imagine might be Keyboard's things, but it'd be really interesting if something went in there, because again, I think we read Sultan as a totally not unsympathetic character. You know, he's somebody that I think when he speaks, the reader listens and feels invested in what he's saying, rather than just kind of writing off. Like at this point, Moriel, every time she speaks, you're going, "What? Stop it! You're just you're just power hungry. You've actually may have gone mad." Whereas Sultan isn't there yet. You know?
Yeah. He does have a bit of self-interest in what he talks to Lysaea about, right? Of course, if he didn't tell him the whole thing about the clan, about anyone with magic being of clan-born descent, I guess Lysaea wouldn't know. But did I understand correctly that what he was telling Lysaea was, if you really are committed to removing all sorcery from the world, then you eventually have to turn on your own friends. Like you have to kill all of us and my family and all the people who have been helping you so far. And he's nervous that that might happen, and that's why he's having this conversation with him. But then also there's the fact that Lysaea wouldn't have known if he hadn't told him that all these people are also clan born.
Or have the inherited gifts, but it's sort of what's been implied about how, and we've seen the shadows of it, how, you know, the little religion he's aspired is going to, you know, eventually, you know, possibly, you know, rage out of Lysaea's control. Now we've already seen the signs of that with how, you know, Cerebel's doing things, you know, the High Council and whatnot, doing things behind Lysaea's back, you know, because, you know, when you foster a, you know, fanatic, you know, devotion, you know, committed to exterminating, you know, whatever. Oh, look, they are committed to exterminating. They're like Daleks. Exterminate.
Cerebral Stavros. There we go. There's a nice reference.
But now for our next part, and I'll just quote this one line. She embarked on a feat no Coriani matriarch before her had ever dared to attempt.
Yeah.
You think maybe you would have stopped for a second and thought about that.
Yeah.
That thought. Like, maybe there's a reason none of them have ever dared to attempt that.
Yeah.
You'd think being alive for 1,000 years would give her a sense of just what the Fellowship can do, but apparently not.
But I think, again, Janny does this quite a lot. She serves reminders of things that we don't see and we don't understand. Like this idea, like Moriel's hubris in that this Fellowship haven't really pushed back on her directly. They've kind of fixed what she's done without interfering directly because that's not their role in society. But yet she's sort of forgotten how ridiculously powerful the Fellowship are in their own right. And if they ever decided to mess about with her, she's like a fly in the ointment in a lot of different ways. And this is where Davian's such an interesting character because as she alludes to herself, who is this guy? What are his motivations and why is he doing the things the way he's doing as opposed to his other Fellowship kind of sorcerers? But also while incorporating them as well, because he does leave the trait sign on Jarrett's head as well. So he's sort of doing that work, but like the rogue, he's like the what do you call him? Zorro. He's Zorro of the Fellowship.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing there is she's confusing inaction with incapable. Just because they
Good
haven't
point.
smacked her down, they can't. And
Yeah. And Chris, you meant spider in the ointment. But I love the description of the Waystone and just how terrible it was, and what it did to the mind. I think we did see it once before, but yeah, expanding on it, I think I love what Janny does. She often does this where we see a glimpse of something and then he expands on it quite a lot the next time around. So yeah, we got a much deeper look at, I guess, the madness of the Waystone and how it kept trying to trap her. So you'd think she must be mad for trying to work with it and do something so crazy with it to trying to entrap a Fellowship sorcerer. Oh my god, you have to be crazy. But I think that chapter with along its descriptions, I think, yeah, that was really wonderful.
And then how about that horrible fate of Lorenda?
Oh my god, that was terrible.
The punishment that these Coriani deal out is just horrid.
It works on a number of levels because obviously I think it works to get you to examine your feelings about Lorenda because obviously Lorenda hasn't been a very nice character to read for a book and a half right about now, but it's that idea whether she deserves this, whether she deserves this, and whether this is just another sign that Moriel thirst for power and thirst for everything, pushing her way and her agenda is going too far, even to the people that are around her. She obviously, this is to everybody but Lorenda, this is a new prime. You know what I mean? So they should be looking at her going, what's she doing? Is she suitable for this role? It's not actually Moriel, even though it is Moriel. So I wonder if an awful lot of this pushing in that direction for there to be a sort of rebellion within the Coriani, or whether even if they wanted to, she's far too powerful at this stage to be able to do anything about it. She's kind of out there on an island.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of that because, we know she's, taking steps to make sure that, no one will question how she got to be, prime so fast, and so she mind wiped everyone except Lorenda and whatnot. So
yeah.
Now she's so reliant on Lorenda to literally be her hands, and that line at the end where Lyrenda is kind of getting back that driven purpose that, oh, I hate Arathon. If I'd never met him, I'm not going to be anybody's puppet. And now she's the one that kind of sort of holds the upper kind of power in this power dynamic relationship between her and Moriel, and Celadie, because even though Celadie technically has the most power, she's also needs Lyrenda. So I'm interested to see how this plays out, because their roles are kind of counterbalanced at the minute.
And it's a bit gross, but also just, again, with how Janny phrases things, and how vivid you get the image for it. The whole bit where, Celadie, after she subdues the Waystone and opens her eyes, and the description of her hands, and you can just see it. It's like you could almost taste the like the smell in your mind, if you know what I mean. It was just I was like, oh god, I can just totally see how her hands look, and it's like it's so vivid.
Yeah, that was just like how vivid it was with describing Jarrett without a tongue, and it was just like
and yet you made jokes about it, Jared.
Was that too soon? I don't know.
Wasn't soon enough.
3 years later, it'll be too soon.
Or her, hand free, and you're just like, oh, you just got to shudder at the description.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think the Lyrenda punishment was a lot of mixed feelings overall, and I think, and of course, at the end of it all, just like Lai said, she will come back around and blame Arathon for it, even though she was the one who did the forbidden thing that she wasn't supposed to. And I like what you said about maybe a potential rebellion here, Chris, because the peeress who inflicted the punishment on her, she seemed very reluctant to go through with it. But that said, the punishment for disobedience is to be made witless, right? Which apparently everybody's okay with. And it seems that it could be pretty small transgressions that do get you that punishment.
Mhm.
So maybe most people in the order have been okay with it all along, and they don't question it. They don't question the prime. And it is a pretty dictatorial system of power here.
Well, I think if they did question it, they'd be made witless anyway. So
yeah,
That's
exactly.
Yeah, and the thing about Lyrenda's punishment, it's like, yeah, you wanted to see her punished because she did some horrendous things,
Mhm.
but I didn't want her punished by Moriel. I wanted her punished by
Yeah.
somebody
That's-
else,
That's
Arathon or
not
somebody
justice.
else.
Yeah.
It's not Moriel that I wanted to see doling out her punishment. That's the
Jared's team Leister here. He's the lesson here. He wants the proper justice, not
proper
not
justice.
yeah.
I just want to see Arathon kick her through one of the stargates. Send her flying out into the vacuum of space, along with Moriel.
In Sparta, kick.
That scene writes itself, maybe,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
There was a lot of fairly gruesome things in in these chapters, but I think it was still very enjoyable to read and a lot to think about. We forgot to talk about Bragan and Arathon
Oh yeah.
and all his cleverness.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
Great-
I would
character.
I would say, rather than cleverness, the ineptitude of the guard.
It's too cold. I'm not gonna go out.
Oh, I needed to go to the toilet. I didn't hear the code word. Oh, I was gonna poo myself.
That was fantastic. I loved that because we've seen that kind of thing thousands of times in all the movies, but to take the changing the clothes and fooling and pretending to be of the army that you're trying to escape, that's pretty repeated across many stories. But I think in this setting somehow it was brilliant to see it didn't feel like he could pull it off, but he did. And yeah, it was just super clever all around.
Yeah, it was good to see another Klansman who had, who was a capable person and who, could get things done when it needed to be done. And so it's a good. I really liked how because he's kind of a new character to us, and so we got a little bit insight into this and another Klansman character who was different and interesting and nice to get to know.
Yeah. And like many of the characters we've met that we've grown to like, I think this one also started out being not very nice to like. But yeah, I think just one chapter flipped it all around. Well, I guess it started to be flipped all around when he took up his charge and said, I will protect him with my life. But now actually seeing him do more things and like be his own person, um and use his own wit, I think makes him stand out and makes him someone that you can like separately. Yep.
Janny's ability to write characters and change perceptions and get you to care about characters within a third of a chapter is, for me, is the real pinnacle of what these books are about. Like you go from a character that you don't like to then being really invested in within such a short space of time, and it happens again and again. Grandmaster Braden, where is she? You said she was going to be coming soon, TV Pro. Shit, she's got to be soon.
We need her.
What?
But
Look
at our final three news items at the end of chapter 10.
Yes.
Wait, what?
Like we catch up with Dakar.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot Dakar and Fionn were even about at this stage. It was,
yeah, we didn't see any Dakar these chapters.
Don't forget the Star Wars and the first one at the end of chapter 8 as well.
Yeah,
that's still going in the background.
Yeah.
Dakar and Luhane, we're going to have Rockfell and what's going on there now.
Yeah.
I noticed that one at the end of chapter 8. I look at some of the names and sometimes it's obvious, but the one there was fluctuations and it had 3 different things. So, Caradmon, you had Kerabord and Elaine escaping, and then you had Prime Celody. And of course, fluctuation is something almost like unexpected, that some kind of change, that's some kind of twist. So of course we've seen how that's affected Celody, with her plan there, that it's been spoiled, but we're yet to see how Caramon and the Wraiths and also all the stuff happening back at Avenor plays into this. So the fact that it's called fluctuations is kind of like a throwing kind of a curveball. I'm keen to see how that plays out now.
Yes.
Exciting.
Any other topics to discuss before we call it done?
Well, our next 3 chapters are Nightfall, Rockfell Peak, and Terrace of Fallen.
Oh, I'm so excited for Rockfell. I've been thinking that thing since Curse of the Mischief. I said, this is a Chekhov's gun. I'm just waiting for it to pop off.
Wow.
Yes.
This is moment to moment. You can feel the bubble about to pop, can't you? It's more so than I think any other point in the book. You can just kind of feel like literally the crest or the top of the mountain is just right up ahead.
Yeah. So that typical thing of, you get it in fantasy quite often, where somebody's like, oh yeah, I just dropped this deadly evil sword in the middle of the lake because nobody's ever going to go down in the middle of the lake and drag it up, right? I'm just going to drop, put the pot with the Mistwraiths in this peak that nobody could ever possibly access, right? I'm just going to leave them there. They'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Love that.
You're all going to hate me when you read the end of chapter 13.
Oh.
You're going to be like, or that you're actually going to be like, no, we can't stop now.
Marsha, what happened? You've already read it, so
See, I know what happens at the end of the whole book. I don't know what happens at ends of individual chapters. If
way.
I did, then I wouldn't come here every week and say I haven't finished my page.
You actually know what happens at the end of the book?
I do.
so that's what happens at the end of every book.
I know some of what happens at the end of the book. I got myself spoiled somehow, but not everything.
I know nothing. It's wonderful.
Oh,
I know everything, and it's wonderful. So
Oh,
that's very vulnerable of you to admit that, Chris.
Yeah, that's me, Mr. Vulnerable, Team Lycer. Gotta get t-shirts
Oh.
made. It's been too long already.
Yeah.
Team Lycer.
Okay, it's like the ultimate,
I'm-
turning up in a room, an empty room of people that you know, and depending on what t-shirt you're wearing, they'll know whether they need to talk to you or whether they don't.
Oh,
Oh man.
all
Awesome.
right. Then
All right.
we will
Let's get
let's
reading.
do outros. Then Chibi Post. Could you start us? off?
I am once again still Chibi Po, and I can be found on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't care that they changed the URL; it's still Twitter. And I can be found on page chewing forums. And every 2 weeks, I'll be here.
Saturday still Moriel. X is still Twitter.
My name is Matt, also known as Miggins. You can find me on Twitter over at Hobbit Hole Books, also a reviewer over at Fantasy Book Critic, and you can find me lurking on the page showing forums from time to time.
Yeah, and I'm Jared. I'm lurking right along with him, and I also run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and on the podcast Speculative Speculations with some of these fine folks here.
Yeah, nice. Same as Jared there in Speculative Speculations. Also on page tune forums with everybody else here, but also on the channel Chronicle of Chris.
And you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain and all the places that all the others said already. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.